You are a blank idiot. Do you know what an idiot is? That's a man with nothing upstairs here. I came to Memphis a little underestimating you guys. Got out there and did my little thing, did my little strut, and beat you, and turned my back to you. That was a mistake. I never underestimate any wrestler because I know they're tough. They've got to be to get in that ring. Well, let me tell you something, pal. You've never experienced what you're going to experience this Monday night. And why I'm calling you an idiot, because you're stupid enough to say that you wouldn't let your two boys wrestle unless you had to be in there. Buddy, that pleases me better than anything I've heard in many years, because the nut house will chew you up and spit you out, boy. When I say boy, that's exactly what I mean, is a boy. Let me tell you something. I've been pounding this pavement, Pally. I've been running 6-8 miles every day. And I'm going to run, and every step I take, I'm going to think about what me and my brother Roughhouse is going to do to you. Yeah, I'm calling on Nut House. The nut. He's a nut, and I'm a fool. And you put a nut and a fool together, pal, somebody's going to get hurt. And I promise you, fans, I promise you this. This is not a threat, it's a promise. I promise you that we're going to hurt these people, and we're going to hurt them bad. And you're going to be there and say, Fargo kept his word. You know the Nut House, and you know what he can do, and you know what I can do. So get out of my way, boy. Get out of my way, because you are in for the worst beating that you've ever taken in your life. Do you understand that, Pally?
The following show is a Pod Avenue production. You are cordially invited to have dinner with the King. Pull up a chair and join WWE Hall of Famer Jerry the King Lawler and Glenn Moore. Enjoy.
Dinner with the King. We are back. I'm Glenn Moore, joined here by WWE Hall of Famer, the man that everybody tunes in to hear. He is Jerry, the King Lawler. They don't tune in for me, King.
I hope they're tuning in. You know, that's the one thing I often wonder, how many people are listening and when are they listening? And do you actually get figures on how many people tune in, as you say, to the podcast?
Yeah, we get 6 digits almost a week with all our shows combined. I mean, this is episode number 59. So people go back and listen to episode 1, or they just, realize that you do have a podcast. They go back and listen from the start and listen to the, the episodes that they want to listen to. So we get thousands of people listening, thousands of people interacting with on social media. And whenever the podcast comes out, there's always, the dirt sheets pick up some good tidbits about the show, and they, post it, and people find out about it.
The dirt sheets.
The dirt sheets. But it's always good reviews. People enjoy the podcast. They enjoy it.
Why do these names of things get so outdated? They're not sheets anymore. They're online, so it's not a sheet of paper, which is what they used to be. That somebody, Meltzer or whoever, would sit down and they'd type out all of this dirt and print it up on a sheet of paper on a printer, and then staple the top of them, if it was more than one page, and then actually mail them out to people, the old hard mail. And now all of that has been replaced by everything's digital, but they still call them the dirt sheets.
Yeah, I mean, people used to get the dirt in the mail, and days after the actual dirt, rose to the surface, and now anybody can start a website, anybody can put fake news out there, and then people. And
obviously, anybody can start a podcast. It seems like as well, right?
Yeah, anybody can, but I mean, if you want to get listeners, I mean, you got to have some kind of good content or a following, which I think you have both, King.
Oh, okay.
Well, we have both.
Well, that's good.
Well,
anyway, how do we get offline of the dirt sheets? One of the things that would have been in the dirt sheets, you get the instant news. That's one reason I love Twitter. I talk to a lot of people, and not everybody's into Twitter. But to me, Twitter, of all the social media things, Twitter is the most informative and the most, it's like instant news. Mm-hmm. If of course, if you follow some, news feeds and that sort of thing. But
credible news feeds.
I love Twitter. Yeah, I mean, you can get credible news, you can get fake news, you can get dirt news, you get all stuff there. But one of the things that we were going to talk about that just we found out on Twitter recently was that one of the most popular wrestlers ever, Vader, Big Van Vader, has passed away. Right?
Yeah, at the age of 63. His son went on his social media earlier this morning. As of this day, we're recording this podcast, and said that Vader passed away the day before, the evening before, and it's been reported the last couple of years his health has not been the best.
Yeah, real bad. I mean, Vader was a guy that, part of his gimmick or part of his persona was the fact that he was so big and so massive and everything. But at the same time, that certainly could not have bode well for his health, his heart and blood pressure and all of those kind of things. The cholesterol, we understand that you said his son said that like 10 clogged arteries. He obviously didn't, take care of his physical wellness the way he should have. And didn't he even say on a recent interview with our friend Bill Apter that he was like a walking time bomb?
Yeah, 10 clogged blood vessels, and he said that he could go anytime. And he tweeted out a lot of this stuff throughout the last couple of years that tomorrow could be the last day, and
Wow.
he was going in for open heart surgery, and going to the doctor a lot.
Did he just recently have a real bad bout with pneumonia?
Yeah, last month he had that, so I'm sure that didn't help at all. But Big Van Vader passed away June 18th at 7:25 p.m. This is according to his son on Vader's social media. So yeah, he underwent open heart surgery in March, and he was on the road to recovery. It's just his heart couldn't take anymore.
Yeah, I would imagine that he probably had congestive heart failure, with that size and the weight and all of that sort of stuff. It's what my brother had. That was not just. It's a sad thing, and one of the few things that, other than heart transplant, there's nothing you can do about it. It just every day gets a little worse.
I told you this, off air, and probably in the last 7 years. Vader was one of my favorites. Your favorite? Yeah, Vader was my early memories of watching. In your house pay-per-views for WWF was watching Vader wrestle, and Vader. I looks like my dad a little bit, so everybody called my dad Vader growing up, and he was one of my favorites.
You put a picture out recently that with you wearing a wrestling mask. And you looked a lot like Vader, and like a young Vader in that picture.
Yeah, the red stubble and this mountain of a man. I'm not as strong as Vader, of course. Vader was very strong, and I don't think I'm that agile as Vader doing flips off the top rope. But yeah, Vader was one of my favorites, and I had a chance to talk with him a few times, to hang out with him when he was up in Cleveland for a local wrestling show, and a couple of years ago, and being able just to sit next to, and we'll talk about Jackie Fargo and how, King, when you first met Jackie Fargo, you were, yes, sir, eyes wide open kind of thing, meeting one of your idols. I mean, that's how I am when I met you, and, meeting some of my idols that I grew up on.
Wait, hang on. What? I don't ever remember you saying yes, sir, to me.
I mean, maybe not saying yes, sir, but it was very respectful, and I still am to you.
Okay.
Yes, King, no King.
But I can imagine you saying yes, sir, to Vader.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he had. We were sitting in the back of a U-Haul, at some indie show, and you're just, shooting the breeze, just talking, and it was just a conversation I'll never, forget. It's just one of those things, and. Yeah, I mean, it's like, meeting one of your childhood idols and being able to talk with them, and not him as being a wrestler, but him as a person, as Leon White.
Yeah, Leon was, I remember one time he came down to Memphis, and I picked him up at the airport, and we were going to wrestle in a little town called Troy, Tennessee, which was about maybe 100 miles straight up Highway 51 from Memphis, straight north, going towards Union City. And there's Troy, Tennessee, wrestling at the school gym there. And like I said, I picked him up from the airport, and opened the trunk and he threw his bag in. And I didn't realize that as he threw his bag in, I was going back around to get to the driver's seat. As he threw his bag in, he opened his bag up, I guess to kind of let it air out. And because, in all honesty, I think everybody that knew Vader knew about the fact that his gear that he would wear, especially the knee pads and the elbow pads, Vader would sweat a lot during his matches. And I don't think, when he was on the road for like a week or so, he didn't take the opportunity to go to a laundromat or anything to wash those elbow pads and knee pads and those things. Anyway, and Vader was kind of known for that, but I'd sort of forgotten it or whatever. But when we got to Troy, Tennessee, that 100-mile ride, and I walked around and I opened up the trunk of my car, and oh my goodness, the smell just came out. It almost knocked me to my knees. And I didn't even put two and two together that smell could be coming from somebody's wrestling gear. I thought a freaking skunk had gotten in the back of my car and died. It was unbelievable. And I just went, oh my gosh, what on earth? And he said, I think that's my elbow pads. I hadn't washed them in about a week. Oh. I went, oh my God. Then I was embarrassed, but it was like, that was the thing when you wrestle Vader, if he got those elbow pads up around your face, you're about ready to tap out. You weren't waiting for a Vader bomb. You're ready to go just from the smell of that gear that he would wear.
You guys didn't face off in the ring. I read my research. I cannot find any.
I don't ever remember actually, except I don't know. I can't imagine that show in Troy. I think I may have wrestled him there, or either we were partners or something like that. But I can't imagine, the two of us being on the same show without being in the same match in that small city. So, but I don't remember in any big venues ever wrestling against Leon.
I'm sure our listeners will correct us if we are wrong, because we know a lot of people that know this stuff instantaneously, or they will look it up and spend some time looking it up. So I'm sure we'll get some tweets, people correcting us very shortly after this segment. But yeah, Vader passing away on Monday, June 18th, 63 years old, King.
Wow, only 63.
Yep, 63.
And you know what happens now?
What?
Well, look for two more wrestlers to kick the bucket.
Oh boy, don't say that.
Doesn't that usually happen in threes?
Well, I don't know who else is going to pass away. If you say it happens in threes, I cringe to find out who the other two, in the next coming days. Hopefully nobody, King.
Yeah, hopefully. Oh, and listen, speaking of kings,
yeah,
they put up this big billboard down here in Memphis. It's so crazy. If you look at it, you probably see it online. That's where I actually saw it. But remember how I think it was in Philadelphia, they put up a big billboard campaign about trying to get LeBron James to come to Philadelphia?
Yep.
Well, now they've done the same thing here in Memphis. I guess some pea-brain thinks that LeBron might consider coming to Memphis and play for the Grizzlies. But it's like this big sign. It says Memphis, where kings become. Three-run homer for the Indians. Ramirez, he is awesome, man. Mm-hmm. But anyway, this big sign says Memphis, where kings become legends, and it's got a picture of B.B. King, Elvis, king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, and then this huge picture of LeBron James. And they didn't even include me in kings become legends in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah, the king of wrestling, Jerry the King Lawler. Why wouldn't they have it up there?
Yeah, and I guarantee you that of those other two kings, LeBron James himself would know me better than the other two kings that they got on the billboard.
Well, yeah, LeBron James is a huge wrestling fan.
Right. I remember talking to LeBron James when he was in high school. He was coming to the matches there in Cleveland when I was wrestling up there. And then you know the story of seeing him down at the Cleveland Browns game underneath the stadium, and he was walking with his entourage, and he saw me, and he told his guys, "Hey guys, there's the real king."
Look at that. Two kings in the same spot.
Exactly. And here in my own hometown of Memphis, they put up a billboard trying to lure LeBron James here, and they don't even include me as when kings become legends.
The person tweeted at us about not including Jerry Lawler on the Memphis Mount Rushmore of sports. I guess.
Oh yeah, that's something different.
Yeah, the Memphis the commercial appeal. You know, they put a Memphis Mount Rushmore, and you know there was no Jerry the King Lawler. And people were like, "Oh well, you know, is it wrestling? Is wrestling a official sport like basketball?" Which is ridiculous because you know I'm gonna say Jerry the King Lawler is still bigger than anything Grizzlies related or any sport coming out of Memphis right now ever.
Oh well.
So
we can't concern ourselves with the Memphis. What do you call it? The Mount Rushmore of sports. Well, the other sad thing, the commercial appeal, which used to be our daily newspaper, and I mean still is basically the Memphis Daily newspaper. It's been bought by USA Today, and it's basically just a ripoff of USA Today, and they've fired all the, basically all of the noteworthy Memphis news people got fired when it was bought out, and it's just a shell of its former self. So the people that are putting something like that together now, like we said about the higher ups, they're not even from Memphis, and they don't know the history of Memphis, and it's scary.
Zach Randolph is on the Memphis sports, Mount Rushmore. He's not even from Memphis. I mean, he played basketball for the Grizzlies, but I mean, he's not even from.
Right.
They have Penny Hardaway, which I can see. Penny Hardaway.
Yeah. Yes, I know Penny Hardaway. But he and I went to the same high school.
And wasn't he at the barbecue restaurant?
He was at the barbecue restaurant just recently, a couple weeks ago. Got a picture. I'll tweet that. I think I may have tweeted that. I know I put it on Instagram.
You did. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of Memphis and the King, SmackDown was in Memphis last week. We didn't do a show last week, so we're going to talk about it this week. But King, it was good to see you back on WWE TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome WWE Hall of Famer and Memphis' own Jerry the King Lawler.
A great reception by the Memphis faithful for the WWE Hall of Famer. Tom, you want to head down to the Hall of Fame Bar and Grill on Beale after this?
Yeah, let's do that.
Byron, you can't come.
Why not? So good to have the legendary Jerry the King Lawler join us for the final SmackDown Live before Money in the Bank this Sunday.
Yeah, that was cool. Always, and I was wondering, and I had tons of people asking me, "Are you going to be a part of SmackDown when it's coming to Memphis?" And I honestly didn't know. I mean, I didn't know, and I don't blame anybody. People just don't realize. What goes into the stuff that the creative team does. And I think that, they're constantly working on what the show is going to be every week, but it's like a last minute thing. I don't think they start working on, like last night after that SmackDown was over, then I think, boom, they may take one day off, or I don't even know if they even take a day off. But then that's when they start working on the next week's SmackDown. And I'm sure that one of the last things on their mind is where SmackDown is emanating from. Because, that it usually doesn't matter as far as the show goes. And so that's something that doesn't always come up. And that's why I never really expect to be on, just because it's in Memphis. But most of the fans do. Fans just think, hey, that's Jerry Lawler's hometown. Surely they'll have him come and do something. And I didn't hear anything from anybody until actually the day of the show. Almost the maybe afternoon of the show. I got a call and they said, hey, we want you to be part of SmackDown. Can you get down to FedEx Forum in the next hour and a half? I said, yeah, I can. I'm just sitting on ready here. So, I headed down and then got back there and they had this AJ Styles interview segment for me to do. And, they hand me the piece of paper. I mean, it was already, they already had it all written up and ready to go. But it's like the first thing you look at and you see it would tell you what segment you're going to be in. And then it'll tell you, where the interview will take place. And it said something that I had never seen on a run sheet before. It said it was going to be at the reverse Okerlund position.
Huh.
Now, would you know what that meant?
Well, usually when Mean Gene was doing interviews, if they weren't backstage, they were on the stage. But when the camera would be facing, towards Gene, and the backdrop would be the stage area. Like in WCW, he would do interviews on the little ramp, and the stage would be behind him. I guess reverse Okerlund position would be, the camera switching positions, and the backdrop would be the fans instead of the stage.
Yes. Man, you're pretty smart, because that's exactly what it was.
Thank you.
It was an interview on the side of the stage, and the camera was, as you said, AJ and I had our back to the crowd, and the camera shooting that way, so that the background of the interview was the big crowd of all the Memphis fans behind us there. But it really was sort of strange to do an interview like that. You come out, you wave at everybody, you get the big Jerry chants and all that kind of stuff, and then you get up on the stage and you turn your back to everybody, and you're talking to nothing but the camera. But yeah, that was cool to get to interview the WWE champion about a big match that was coming up, and that was the go home show for the Money in the Bank pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So it was a big show.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, now I'm not. This is
I know
me
you're
talking.
complaining. What about?
This is me. This is my administration. But they give you one question to ask, and then you're done in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
They couldn't give you a bigger segment, or
well, actually, the whole segment was almost 5 minutes. But what happens is, they include the introductions. Yeah. So, boom, the segment started as soon as my music started playing. And then, they gave me the good the music introduction and intro, and got to make my way out and stop and wave and do all of that cool sort of stuff. Then boom, we went from that to AJ's music and his intro. And then by that time, we were like 2.5 minutes into the 5-minute segment, and there was basically time for the one question. I did throw in the little Andy Kaufman reference there, which they didn't have, but it was talking about him slapping Nakamura, so it just seemed like natural to get that little bit in there, tell him that she slapped the taste out of his mouth, although the old saying there. But it was cool. But yeah, I guess we could have gone on longer. I don't know.
You could have had Nakamura come out and attack Styles, and you could have made the save.
Yeah, right.
Back in the day, King, when they used to do like interviews like that, King's Court, or when you used to moderate, if there was stuff that you had to moderate, did they ever give you a full script like that, or was just ad lib, go off the cuff?
No, back in the days of the King's Court, no, it was those were just ad libbed.
Yeah, it's amazing how things change.
Yeah.
But one thing I will, before we get off this subject and go to something else, I was jealous of you, King, when your time in SmackDown, when I get a text from the King, and it's a picture of you and Paige. And I love Paige. She's my favorite. I was very jealous.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. And the fact that we were about to go out to do the interview, and Paige just came. We were in the gorilla position backstage there. And everybody was back there. Vince was not there for some reason. Vince had left and gone back after Raw. He had some business to attend to on that Tuesday, so he wasn't there. But everybody else was in the gorilla position, getting ready for our segment. And all of a sudden, in comes Paige, and she comes over and hugs me, and she said, "Let me can I take a picture?" And I said, "You want to take a picture of my butt again?" And, kind of just wanted to try to bring up the, and she just started laughing. But anyway, no, she took 3 or 4 selfies. And then I said, send them to me. and that's my cheap way of getting somebody's telephone number. So
I lost my number. Can I have yours?
Yes, exactly. So, but anyway, so she sent me that, and I immediately thought, I got to send this to you to show you, just to make you eat your heart out, to know that I was there with my arm around Paige.
Yeah, very jealous of you being with Paige. So who runs SmackDown when Vince isn't there? Triple H?
I didn't see Triple H either.
Huh. I wonder who was running SmackDown.
I believe who was
Road Dogg?
I think Road Dogg was sitting in the chair that's usually occupied by Vince. And I'll tell you who produces the announcers is Michael Cole.
Right. Yeah.
And so
Michael Cole.
Can't remember who all else was over there.
How long does Michael Cole have until he steps aside? Do you think he's in for the long haul, or do you think he
Michael's definitely in for the long haul. Yeah. But I've talked to Michael several times about the fact that, he's got this whole thing, thought out pretty well. I mean, Michael saves his money and he invests some money and that sort of thing. And I think he's doing it in the with the intentions of someday, being able to walk away and just kind of relax for a long time. He lives all the way down in Texas, almost on the Mexican border down in Texas, and saves his money. And one of these days, he loves what he's doing, and I think does a terrific job. But he doesn't want to be there forever. He wants to be able to walk away and still be young enough to enjoy life.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, speaking of return to WWE. We saw the return of a two-time guest on the podcast, a man who's a big fan of the podcast, big fan of yourself, King. James Ellsworth is back in the WWE.
Yes, that was kind of cool. I think I know it got a huge pop when he unmasked, because I think everybody thought it was a female, and speaking of it being him being not a female, that's one of the latest things that he's done on his independent circuit wrestling. He's trying to rip off, I don't say copy, I say he's trying to rip off the Andy Kaufman gimmick of being the intergender wrestling champion.
Yeah.
So.
Well, maybe WWE's like, we got to put a stop to this. Get him back in WWE.
You want him back in WWE?
I mean, I'm saying maybe WWE is like, we got to put a stop to this intergender stuff. Let's get Ellsworth.
Well, that could be true. I don't know.
So I'm not sure if it's a full contract for him or if it's just a couple appearances for Ellsworth, but he's back on WWE TV. And you're right, I got a nice little pop there. And
I know we have him booked. We have him booked down here in let's see, August 5th. He's booked in Jackson, Tennessee.
Ooh.
Against me.
What?
Yes.
He's gonna put the intergender championship on the line?
Well, I don't know if it wouldn't be an intergender championship match. I think that would have to be against a female.
Well, no, he does defend it against men for it too.
Against men?
I think he has, yeah. Or he's joked about it, or he's on social media he's made it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that would be a joke. I wouldn't want to be the intergender champion, would you?
Wearing a pink and blue belt? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to be the intergender champion.
I mean, you want to carry that around Memphis, the intergender?
No, I would not carry that around Memphis. No.
Go to the barbecue restaurant, the bar. You can put that.
No,
you can put that in a case in the bar.
No.
But
don't want to do it.
No, you're not going to do it. So no, Ellsworth back in WWE. You were not partying, but we had lunch with the 2K people in Memphis.
Yeah, they were in town. Apparently, I guess they were doing some body scans, photographing everybody's body. They rented out Cook Convention Center and had 2 days or 3 days maybe of the talent coming in and taking all the body scans, which is a really cool thing when they do those things. But now that was, I was waiting sort of like the SmackDown invitation, thinking that at the last minute they'll call me up and say, hey, we're shooting for the 2019 video game. We probably need to get you in there, King. But you know what? That call never came, Glenn.
Unbelievable. I would not play the game until we get Jerry the King Lawler back in it.
And you know what I asked people, and people have asked me, hey, when they saw the picture that I tweeted out and got out there with all the guys, it was like 6 different guys from the 2K18. And they said, does that mean you're going to be in the game? And I said, no. Unfortunately, all those guys are my friends, especially Steve and Bryce. But they at least they tell me that that's not part of their responsibility of what they do at 2K18. They're not part of the people that decide who's going to be in the game. Mm-hmm. So I let them off the hook, okay, all right, I won't blame you. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we went to Blue City Cafe, and somebody picked up the bill, which was really, oh my gosh, it was so good. The food was so good. I had a big, huge steak, and we had gumbo fries. Oh man, they've put out a big plate of French fries, and then they pour gumbo all over it. It is so awesome. But anyway, at least I got a free meal out of the deal.
Yeah. Would you rather be in the game or get a free meal?
In the game.
In the game. Well, before we go to our Jackie Fargo tribute show, which is what we're going to be talking about majority of the show, one final thing to talk about, King. You had Dana White, UFC, wrestler.
Oh my gosh.
Dustin
yeah, I got a couple
yeah.
more things to talk about. Dana White, the people from V3 fights. Are you familiar with that?
I am a little bit, yes.
Okay, well, that's, I guess, another. I guess to me, it may be sort of like NXT is to WWE. This V3 may be that to the UFC.
Yeah,
I think it's like a training deal, and they go around and have fights around the country. And they were having a fight in Memphis, or did have a fight in Memphis on Saturday night. And so I had some people from the V3 call me a month or so ago and said, "Hey, listen, Dana White is going to be in town to watch those fights, and it's just like he's looking for UFC talent, future UFC talent." And he said also what Dana is going to do, he's going to come in a day early, and they want to film an episode of his TV show, which Dana has a show that's on YouTube and I guess on the UFC network called Dana White Looking for a Fight. And they explained to me that he just, in different cities that they're in, he'll go in, find something kind of local flavor to get involved in and have a couple of guests on the show. And then he'll attend those matches and pick out one of the fighters and I guess give him a UFC contract. Well, anyway, their idea for the show was to have me come out and meet Dana and 2 of his MMA fighters at the UFC gym here in Memphis. And I would go in the ring with all those guys and show them, maybe a little bit of the difference between the wrestling or pro wrestling and the UFC stuff. And then later on that night, they were going to set up a ring outside my club and have the 2 UFC fighters go against 2 professional wrestlers. And I thought, well, that all sounds cool, but man, how's that going to work out? So anyway, I wound up meeting Dana White and his 2 fighters at the gym earlier in the day. Got in the ring with them, had a really good time showing them, just some of the a couple of different holds. But the main thing was like, I told him, I said, you guys are going to find out that this is a little bit of a different environment, and the fact that, you guys fight inside a cage, and here you're going to be in a wrestling ring with these ropes. And I just want to, you guys need to kind of get accustomed to what it's going to be. If you get pushed back against that cage, that's a hard metal thing with no give to it. I said, if you get thrown into the ropes here in a wrestling ring, boom, you're going to get sprung, you're going to spring off those ropes, and hopefully it'll throw you back at your opponent, or either all the way across the ring to the other ropes. And so I had the guys run the ropes a little bit, and then just show them a little bit about maybe throwing a punch or a few things like that. And it really went well. And especially Dana White was awesome in the fact that he was, he was so into it. He just was, really wanting to know everything there was to know about it, and he wanted to be involved. And he was like throwing punches or trying to throw punches and taking punches and all that sort of stuff. And the funny thing was, apparently, I say apparently, I had heard that at one time back when the UFC was just red hot, I think Vince or the WWE wanted Dana White to be involved in a wrestling show at like WrestleMania. And I don't know what happened, but it never took place. And I don't know if Dana turned them down or whatever, but I'm thinking, man, here's a guy who turned down wrestling at WrestleMania, and all of a sudden here he is in a Memphis ring out in front of my club and doing a wrestling show. And so we wound up getting to the my club about 5:30. Everybody met down in the VIP room. And huge crowd, man, what a great turnout. Because, we had an actual ring set up right on the middle of Beale Street, right out in front of my club. And we had thousands of people we always have thousands of people on Beale Street on Friday night anyway, but this was even more special. And so we did a little deal that I sort of, in order to make the match more, in my mind, entertaining and work out better, I suggested a little deal where the two MMA fighters wouldn't be the best of friends, even in the early part of the show out at the gym when I was showing them some different things about wrestling. They were just not on the same page, and in actuality, they had fought each other one time, and then the decision was like either reversed or something. So there was legitimate heat between these two guys, and so I just kind of played up on that a little bit more, so that they looked like they weren't going to be a good tag team because they weren't cohesive or whatever. And then we had the same situation with our two wrestlers, which was Dustin Starr and Derek King. These two guys have wrestled each other a number of times, and so I had them not be on the same page as well. So when we got down to the Beale Street, everybody got in the ring, and it was like the two teams, the two wrestlers and the two MMA fighters, they were bickering between each other. And so I kind of stepped in with Dana, and I said, you know what, it looks like, somebody's got to restore some order here. And I guess since this is my club, it's going to have to be me. So, I looked at the two MMA fighters, which I said, Matt, you don't like Dean, and Dean, you don't like Matt. And then I looked over at Derek King. I said, Derek, you don't like Dustin Starr. Dustin, you don't like Derek King. So here's what I'm going to do in this match. I'm going to take you, Derek King, and I'm going to put you partners with Matt over here on the MMA. And then Dean here in the MMA, I'm going to make you partners with Dustin Starr. And so, and then they all went over and hugged each other, and it was all like they were happy with their new teammates. So what we did there was we were able to make it almost like not a mixed match, but a match where during the match, the wrestlers could kind of go against the wrestlers, and the MMA fighters could go against the MMA fighters. And so, and then of course we did have interaction all the way around, but it would make for a longer match. We only had one match, and we wanted it to go about at least 20 minutes or so, just to give the people, even though it was free, to give them their money's worth. So it really worked out well. And to see Dana White interacting, he got in on the finish and helped hold his the guys that he was managing, helped hold down for the 3 count. Then the heel manager was Maria, which was Dustin Starr's wife. She came in, jumped on Dana White's back, and was riding him around the ring, piggyback, trying to choke him out. And it was really a fun event, and it really went well. And Dana was really happy. They filmed it. It's going to air during the summer, this summer on his YouTube show and his network show. That's
great. I saw a lot of the photos, and
yeah,
the street was packed with people. And
yep.
I saw pictures from Dustin and Maria posting on social media. So that was good exposure for you, King. And I saw you're wearing one of your Pro Wrestling Tees King shirts.
Yes, I was. I sure was.
You love that shirt, don't you? I see you.
And Mr. Belding, Dennis Haskins, Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell was in attendance. He came into town and was there watching and everything. And he and I went out to dinner afterwards. It was all really one of those deals where you look back on it and say, you know what, it couldn't have been better. You didn't know how it was going to turn out, but in the end, it couldn't have turned out any better than it did.
That's great. That's good. So look forward to people seeing that during the summer. And how's Dana White? I heard.
And then, you know what? Oh my gosh, he was such an awesome guy. He really was a cool guy, and I think he had a lot of fun. I think it all went so smooth and so easy for him that he enjoyed being in Memphis. And then I heard their V3 fights went over really well the following night. And he told me, he said, King, I really do appreciate you doing this for us and doing this with us. And he said, I want you to know, I don't know how much you come out to Vegas, but if you're out there, and he just said that, he said, Vegas is my town. He said, I get you anything you want in Vegas. He said, I don't care if you want to come to fights. He said, I don't care if you want to come to shows. He said, I don't care if you need hotels, anything you need in Vegas, you just call me. So, I mean, you know, that was really cool. And it was a good night. Then the following night, I had to fly up 6 o'clock the next morning. I had to be up on a plane flew to Philadelphia, and then got picked up and drove to Six Flags in New Jersey. And we did a big wrestling show that night where Ryback and I were partners against their tag team champions up there. And Mick Foley was on the show. We did a meet and greet for about 3 hours there at Six Flags. And then I think Hornswoggle was there, and Jack
Swagger.
Jack Swagger was there. It was quite a show. Tons of people. It was one of those deals where, you know, it was the show was just part of the event of the day, you know. So if you came to Six Flags, you could go to the show for free, and there was thousands of people in this big auditorium setting. Except it was outside. And that was a little warm up there, but it was a lot of fun too.
Well, there you go. A busy week for the King, SmackDown, and then you had UFC. You got Dana White in town. It was a busy week for the King.
And I got Harrison, Arkansas. I'm wrestling Matt Riviera at the Harrison Youth Center this Saturday night, June 23rd. Superstar Bill Dundee is going to be over there. He's going to be in action as well. The former NWA World Champion Tim Storm's going to be there. They got a 10-man battle royal on the card for the Southern Heavyweight Championship. The old Hall of Fame referee, James Beard, who was big in the Mid-South wrestling over there for years, he's going to be the special referee for this night. But, it's going to be – that's this Saturday night in Harrison, Arkansas. That's way over, man. That's way over the other side of Arkansas. They're actually flying me over. I'm a little concerned about this. I used to be excited to do this. And now I haven't done it in so long, I'm a little concerned about it. They're flying me over in a private plane and back that night.
Oh, yeah. At night?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, at least you're getting the star treatment with the private plane.
That's cool, but I don't know. You know, you're riding all of a sudden in a little single-engine plane. I don't know. This was so weird. I just did an appearance at Lafayette's not too long ago, and the band, Leonard Skinner. Yeah. You know, they died in a plane crash, and there's a company. This is it's a little bit on the morbid side, but if you're a Leonard Skinner fan, there's a company that has parts of the airplane that crashed, and they're taking small bits of that. Well, like the WWE does, they'll take the mat from the ring at WrestleMania and cut it into, you know, thousands of little bitty squares, and they'll put those in trading cards and things like that. And, you know, you get an actual piece of the mat that, that everybody wrestled on at WrestleMania. Well, there's a company that bought the remaining parts of the plane that Leonard Skinner crashed in, and they've made little small pieces of the metal into jewelry.
Jeez.
Yeah, into like necklaces and
earrings. Why would you want to wear that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're a Leonard Skinner fan, you know, and so it was funny that I was just helping him auction off some of these things for charity just recently at a show in Memphis, and then all of a sudden I'm going to fly on this little plane. I'm thinking, man, I hope they're not in a few months selling pieces of the plane that that went down with the King in it. You know,
come on,
kind of morbid, huh?
Or you could be like Buddy Holly. You know, he passed. You know,
yeah, Buddy Holly and. What was her name? The country music star, Patsy Cline.
Oh boy! Okay.
Ricky Nelson.
Jeez. All right.
And you know
all right.
what? Ricky Nelson's sons, the Nelson twins, his two sons were at this show at Lafayette, where they were selling the Leonard Skinner plane. Okay, now that we're on that note, you know what? Now that I think about it, I may drive back. I may take a car trip. Okay, special time in the show. This is just for the guys right now, because we want to talk about, or at least I want to talk about, sex. That's right. I want to talk about some good sex, right? Remember the days when you were always ready to go? Huh? I do. Well, let me tell you about our new sponsor. It's called Blue Chew. That's right, blue like the color. And with Blue Chew, you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. BlueChew.com brings you the first chewable with the same FDA-approved active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, so you know that it works. Now, since they're chewable, they work up to twice as fast as a pill, so you can be ready anytime, day or night. Blue Chew is prescribed online and shipped straight to your door in a discreet package. No more in-person doctor visits, no more waiting in the pharmacy, and best of all, no more awkwardness. Blue Chew is made in the United States and shipped direct, so they're cheaper than a pharmacy. So right now, here's what you need to do. We got a special deal for our listeners. Visit BlueChew.com and get your first shipment free. That's right, I said free, when you use our special promo code KING, K-I-N-G. All you do is pay $5 for shipping. Again, that's Blue, B-L-U-E, Chew, CHEW.com, promo code KING to try it absolutely free. Blue Chew, the better, cheaper, faster choice.
First of all, I'd like to explain to everybody that this little interview is being made early Thursday morning, and Bill and I got up bright, well, not bright, but we got up early and went to the hairstyles. We've had our hair done this morning. We put on our best clothes to come over to...
That's your best.
We put on our best clothes today to come over and see you, and what do we get? Jackie Fargo in his underwear. Now, what is
that? Ain't my drawer legs. That's my jogging shorts, Pally. That's my jogging shorts. Can't you tell the difference?
I suppose as early as it is, you've already been out running this morning.
Yes, I have, Jerry. I really have. I got about 3 or 4
All right, King. Well, this subject for this episode of Dinner with the King is very near and dear to your heart, because it's about a man that you said time and time again that if this man did not exist, or there would be not a Jerry the King Lawler, and that's Jackie Fargo. And
that's a fabulous Jackie Fargo to you, Pally.
Pally. This is fitting to have this around here in mid-June, because he did pass away in 2013, June 24th. Yep. And that is actually 39 years from that date. Earlier to that date was a historic match between you and Jackie Fargo in the Mid-South Coliseum. Only almost 12,000 people came to watch that. 1974, King.
Yep.
So that's 44 years ago in a couple of days, where if there was a passing of the torch, and I know that, maybe that's kind of like the wrong thing to say back in the day because you guys weren't thinking about that, but to wrestling historians, that the fans, the passing of the torch, where Jackie Fargo, the number one guy in Memphis, and then, you became the number one guy kind of after that match. That match kind of like was the passing of the torch. And that match is on YouTube. And just watching that match, King, I mean, there's no high-risk moves, high spots. It's just two guys who can throw a punch, who can just throw haymakers and sell, and it's me being 34 years old, I grew up in the Attitude Era where there's antics and high spots and whatnot, but I love that kind of wrestling match, and that's just a
brawl,
just a brawl. Two brawlers.
Jackie Fargo was known as a brawler, and he, in my mind, still to this day, threw the best punch in the business. I mean, and that's how I feel like I learned. And I never once did Jackie Fargo ever set out to train me or say. I mean, I think maybe once or twice after I was in the business, he may have said something like, "Look, kid, don't do it like that. Do it like this," or just try to tell you something. But I learned, throwing punches from watching Jackie Fargo, just from watching him. I mean, and he was in my mind the best at well, not just punches, but at everything he did. I loved Jackie's interviews. I mean, he could relate to the fans and through his interviews, and he can make the people feel what he was feeling. It was so good. He also, I don't know, he was never one of the guys with the big physical. He wasn't a great big physical specimen. He was not a workout kind of guy, and I guess that's probably another thing that I got from Jackie. I know Jackie. He was not a guy that would go to gyms and that sort of stuff, but he wouldn't work out, but he could work. I mean, and I'll never forget the first time I ever met Jackie Fargo. I was a huge wrestling fan, and I would go to the matches with my dad on Monday nights. And at that time, they weren't even at the Coliseum yet. They were at the old Ellis Auditorium in downtown Memphis. And so we would go to the matches and watch him on Saturday mornings. And he was the most flamboyant guy that would come through Memphis. He had the long bleach blonde hair, and he more so, I don't know, I think in that time, most people looked at the wrestlers as being all from Memphis, but Jackie, everybody knew, and they announced him as being from New York City. And in reality, Jackie he and his so-called brother Don Fargo, the Fabulous Fargos, had wrestled in New York for Vince McMahon Sr. And so he had the big major league credentials, whereas a lot of the other Memphis wrestlers seemed like, local Memphis wrestlers. But I sent my little drawings in that I would do of the different wrestlers when I was about maybe 19, I guess. And I drew some wrestlers' pictures and sent them to the TV station. And gosh, the one day after I sent them in, Lance Russell, our great announcer, showed my artwork on TV, and it was a picture of. I remember one of the first ones I drew was a picture of Tojo Yamamoto doing a karate chop on Jackie Fargo, and it was chopping Jackie in half, just like a piece of cordwood, like a big piece of, like a tree going timber. And I showed, his left side on one side and his right side on the other, and he was being chopped by this big karate chop from Tojo Yamamoto. So anyway, when they showed this artwork on TV, after the show was over, I got a call from Lance Russell, and he said, "Jerry, everybody loved your artwork, and we wondering if you wanted to do some more." He said, "But one person in particular really liked your art, and he was wondering if you could come next week, and he wanted to meet you and talk to you about doing some artwork on a club that he owns." And I said, "Yes, sir. Who's that?" And he said, "Well, Jackie Fargo." And it was like, oh my gosh. And then I realized that he, along with Eddie Bond, who was a local country music singer, owned a club called the Southern Frontier down on Madison Avenue. And Jackie apparently wanted me to come over and paint some caricatures of him and Eddie Bond on the inside of his club. So the next week I got to go over to the Channel 13, and that was the first time I actually got to meet Jackie Fargo. And he's like, hey kid, how you doing? And he's just a big gruff voice, and I was, "Yes sir, Mr. Fargo, I'm Jerry Lawler," and I don't know, I was just starstruck totally. But then he had me come over and meet him at his club, and we just walked through his club, and he would show me, "I like something right there, and maybe do a picture of me right there, and something of Eddie right here," and so I wound up working as just doing a lot of artwork for Jackie in the mornings when his club wasn't open yet. He would get there early anyway and kind of get things situated, ready for him to open up for the day. And all of a sudden, I was just getting to pal around with Jackie Fargo away from the wrestling. He would stand and watch me paint, and it was like the most awesome thing to me, I'm sitting there painting a picture of Jackie Fargo, and he's sitting over here watching me, and he's also the biggest TV and wrestling star in the whole in the world to me, but of course in all of Memphis. So that was it was very awe-inspiring for me, and I was just totally taken aback by. I'll never forget. I'd go over there and work in the daytime, and then Jackie would. Sometimes at night when he wasn't booked on the road, he would be at his club, and he loved to work down in the kitchen, and it was so crazy. They had a 16-ounce T-bone steak.
Ooh.
This may be where JR got the phrase from. But who did you say? Good old JR. But anyway, this may be where he got the phrase from. But this was in probably 1970. Yeah, I think it was in 1970. And they sold a 16-ounce T-bone steak for $2.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And I think that's where JR got the phrase, tougher than a $2 steak. But anyway, but that was the deal back then. Then they also had a thing called it was like a double quarter pounder with cheese or something, but he called it a Fargo burger, right? Mm-hmm. And it was this huge, big half pound of roast or half pound of ground beef on a bun. And I would work there in the daytime, and then sometimes I had a little 1962 Ford Falcon, and I had a girlfriend, and I would pick her up, and I'd say, "You want to go down by the club and see if we can get a Fargo burger for dinner?" Right now, we weren't old enough to go in the club, so I would come around to the back door, and I walk out the back door, and I bang on the back door, and Jackie, and he had this old black lady that was a cook. He called her Sam, and they would be in the kitchen cooking steaks and making burgers and stuff. And I'm knocking on the door, and finally he'd open the door and say, "Hey, kid, what do you want?" And I was just like so embarrassed. I'd say, "Well, Mr. Fargo, I was wondering if I could get a couple of those Fargo burgers." I'd be laughing like a goof, I was just I was just so in awe of the guy, right? And he said, "Yeah, come on in." And I'd have my girlfriend waiting out in the car, right? And I'd stand in there while he'd cook me a couple of Fargo burgers. And inevitably, the poor lady cook that knew him so well, she'd been working for him for years. And he'd say, "Sam, see this kid here? See this Jerry Lawler kid?" She said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Fargo." He said, "Oh, Sam, he said something real bad about you." And he would say supposedly what I had said, which was horrible, and which I had not said about her, right? Yeah. And he said, "Yeah, he said that about you, Sam." And I'm standing there going, "Oh, I was so embarrassed." I go, No, I swear I didn't say that. I did not say that. But he just loved to embarrass me and just get the best of me at that particular time. I'll never forget one time I was up there painting with my little 62 Ford Falcon, and he comes out of the kitchen. He says, "Hey, kid, give me a ride down to the grocery store. I got to get some lettuce for tonight, right, for the salads." And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Jackie Fargo, I'm going to get to drive Jackie Fargo, the fabulous Jackie Fargo, down the street to the grocery store, right? And so, yes, sir. So we go and we get in my little 62 Ford Falcon, and so he closes the door, and he's on the passenger side, and all of a sudden he scrunches down, way down in the seat where you can't even see his head through the window, right? And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Kid, I'm Jackie Fargo. You don't want people to see me in a shit box like this, do you?" And I was like, I was so proud. Then I was just deflated, I was like, oh my God, my little shit box here that I'm driving him around in. But anyway, it was like he was just the best. I mean, I love the guy. Like we got to have a great relationship. This is gosh, so many stories. I mean, when I first. Then Jackie came up with the idea. He liked my artwork so much, and when I painted his picture on every square inch of that club, he came up with the idea with his partner Eddie Bond, who we're partners in the club business with, and Eddie Bond was also the program director on a local radio station, KWAM, and so he gave Jackie an air shift on there, and Eddie Bond had a major air shift and drive time, and so they came up with the idea of starting the Bond Fargo Sign Company. And they said, they'd use their names and they would plug it on the radio, and I would be the artist that would, this was back in the day, like if everybody that had some kind of business where you used a pickup truck or whatever, you'd have the name of your business on the side of your truck, but it would be painted instead of nowadays everything is done with
with decals and
everything's done with decal or stickers or that sort of thing. But back in the day, it was all painted, and I was actually doing the artwork. I mean, I remember I was just a kid, and they had this little building right next to the southern frontier, and that was my little office. They set that up, and I painted Bond Fargo Sign Company on the window of that, and then so I was just working away as an artist there every day, and oh my gosh, and this one of those stories. We finally got this big job of this like a big piece of plexiglass, and it was going to be used in a they had built this metal frame for this sign, and I took the piece of plexiglass and I would paint the wording on it, and then spray the back of it with white paint, and then boom, they'd put it in this frame, and it had 3 neon lights behind it. So it was just basically a hand painted light up neon sign for a church, and it was the Church of the Nazarene. And so I worked on this thing for days, and they were charging what I thought was a crazy price. Jackie had lined it up with this preacher that he knew for me to do this sign. And so then I was finally done. I was so proud of it. And the preacher comes to pick it up, and Jackie Fargo's there. And the preacher all of a sudden stops, and he looks at it, and I could just see the color drain out of his face. And he looks over at me, didn't say a word. And then he looks back at the sign again, and he said, "You spelt Nazarene wrong." And I had put Nazi, Nazi.
Oh no!
Oh, God! And this thing had been painted, and then the whole sheet of plexiglass was ruined because then I'd spray painted the back of it. And oh my gosh, Jackie Fargo went. I mean, he was so embarrassed, and he reamed me out about that. But just. Oh my gosh! I mean, I just had a great time. And then Jackie would start letting me go on trips with him sometimes. I mean, basically, when I look back on it now, I was kind of his stooge. I would be there like a little gopher or whatever. But just to being around Jackie, to go on a trip from Memphis up to say Dyersburg or something like that, it was 80 miles, no big deal. And he would drive a big Cadillac, and I'm sitting over there, and we would stop on the way out of Memphis, and I'd go in. We'd go into a convenience store and get a Coke in a can and a bag of potato chips or something like that. And I'd sit in the car, and then he'd drive and tell all these crazy stories. But inevitably, every time I'd get a bag of chips and my Coke. As soon as he'd get in the car, he'd just look over somebody, and he'd catch me looking the other way, and he'd just reach over and grab my chips and just crush them. Right, just crunch them up into just like crumbs. Just I don't know why. It just as soon as I was looking the other way, he just goes and he just crushed my bag of potato chips. He'd do that every time, and I'd fall for it every time. I'd never remember that he was going to do that. But he was just such a funny guy, and he was just always. I think he loved being around me because he could rib me so easy. I was so naive. One of the times he there early in the club, and they were just getting everything ready to open up, and I was finishing up one of my drawings, and there was a girl waitress named Marie. She was so pretty, and she was up there counting out change and everything and wrapping silverware. And Jackie comes walking by and says, "Hey, Marie, She said, yes, sir. I said, Jerry Lawler wants to paint your picture. She said, oh, that would be nice. Yeah, he wants you to paint you naked. He wants you to pose naked. And I was like, no, oh no, I never said that. I swear, didn't I know? Just, he would just get the biggest kick out of embarrassing me to everybody, but he was just a classic guy. Some of the first times I ever went to, I'll never forget. He pulled on Jerry Calhoun up in I think that was Dyersburg. It was Jonesboro. We went over to Jonesboro in the old American Legion building, and it was one of the first times Jerry Calhoun was ever refereeing. And he goes in, he takes his clothes off all nice and proper and prim, and has a hanger for him, and he hangs them up in the little locker room there, and puts his shoes up under the bench where he's getting dressed. And then when he goes out to start, he puts his boots on, he goes out, starts refereeing the match. And then at the end of the night, comes in, takes his little shower, and starts putting his clothes on. Then he goes to put his shoes on, and he can't pick them up. He looks, and somebody had nailed his shoes to the floor. It's just, of course, Jackie Fargo, he found a hammer and 2 nails and went inside and nailed Jerry's shoes right to the wooden floor there. But, oh gosh, he was such a great guy. And when I was, before I ever even got started wrestling for Nick Goulas, who was the local promoter there in Memphis, Nick Goulas and Roy Welch, I don't know if I'd ever even mustered up the nerve to actually say to Jackie, because I was still small, I certainly didn't look like a wrestler, but I was at the same time, I was like at home, after high school and just starting going to college, I was like a backyard wrestler. Just because I watched all this stuff, me and my buddy Mike Mashburn and Robert Reed, all the guys that lived on my street, Vernon Avenue, we would wrestle around all the time and do all these kind of crazy backyard wrestling moves. And I at that time, that's when I was thinking, man, I would love to be able to do what Jackie Fargo does for a living. This looks like so much fun. What a great thing to do, with your life. But I could never get up the nerve to ever say to Jackie, this is something that I would like to do, and would you help me get into this? But one day I was working up there in this little office beside the club, and I was painting away, and all of a sudden this young guy comes walking into my little office there, and he said, I'm looking for Jackie Fargo. And I said, well, he's not here. I said, that's his club next door, but he won't be in till a little bit later on. I said, he doesn't get in till about 6 o'clock. I said, what'd you need with him? And he said, well, I'm a wrestler, and I just came down from, I think somewhere in Missouri. And he said, I was just wanting to talk to him about getting booked here in Memphis. And I looked at the guy, and, he just didn't, he didn't really look that much like a wrestler. He just looked sort of like me, right? Just maybe a little bit heavier. And his name was Jerry as well. His name was Jerry Vickers. And I said, so you're a wrestler? And he said, well, yeah. I said, I'm kind of just getting started. So that's why I'm, coming down from St. Louis, and I'd like to see if I can get booked down here. And so I said, well, how did you get into it? How did you get started? And he said, well, I just got a guy up there, a local guy, to kind of train me, and then got a pair of tights and boots and that sort of thing, and just started wrestling in smaller places. And I said, dang. Well, I said, because I really was just, I really wanted to talk to Jackie Fargo about, I just wanted to try it myself one time, but I didn't have the nerve to ask Jackie. And he said, well, if you've never wrestled before, he said, they're not going to let you, just start wrestling for Nick Goulas and them. And he said, you need to try to get started somewhere smaller. And he said, matter of fact, I'm wrestling Saturday night over in West Memphis, Arkansas. And I said, what do you mean you're wrestling? And I had even no idea about independent wrestling or anything. I had never even heard of something like that. And over in West Memphis, Arkansas, right across the bridge, they had an old promoter named Aubrey Griffith, who used to wrestle for Nick Goulas, and he didn't wrestle for him anymore. And then he started up his own little promotion business, where he would have matches once a week in an old rundown abandoned movie theater. It was called the Avon Theater in West Memphis, Arkansas, and they had taken out about the first 15 rows of the front rows of the seats in front of the screen, and they set a ring up down there. The screen was still there in the movie theater, and that was on one side, and then the seats were all the way back, just like you're watching a movie, and then the ring was down at the end. And for a ring light, they had an old galvanized wash tub hanging up above the ring with like 3 or 4 150-watt light bulbs in it, and that was their makeshift ring light. And he said, we have these matches over here every week. And he said, and then everything was a gimmick then. Everybody was kind of self-serving. What he was wanting to do was, I found out later, he had an extra pair of wrestling boots that he wanted to sell. And he said, you're not gonna ever be able to be a wrestler unless you have wrestling boots. And he said, I just happen to have a pair that I'll sell you for $50. And $50 back then was like, oh my gosh, that was like my car cost $250, and they wanted $50 for this pair of wrestling boots. But when I saw him, it was like, he pulls them out of this bag, and it was like a gold brick or something to me. I said, oh my gosh, there's a pair of actual wrestling boots that I could own. And so anyway, I went and scrounged up the money, and I gave the guy the $50, and he had a pair of tights that they let me buy, and he said, that's all you need to be a wrestler. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And he said, I'll take you over Saturday. If you'll introduce me to Jackie Fargo later, I'll take you over Saturday with me and introduce you to Aubrey Griffith, and maybe he would book you. So I go, actually we went before Saturday. It was like a Thursday or something. I get with this guy, Jerry Vickers. We go over to this Avon Theater on a Thursday afternoon, and I meet Aubrey Griffith. And Jerry said, whatever you do, don't tell him that you have not ever wrestled before. If he asks you if you've wrestled before, you say yeah. And he said, because they're not going to use just somebody off the street that's never had a match. I said, okay. And he said, so if he asked you if you ever wrestled before, you just say yeah. And if he asks you where, just say that you wrestled some down in Florida. So, he won't question any more than that. So we go in, I meet Aubrey Griffith. I actually had remembered him from doing matches for Nick Goulas, a few years back or whatever. And so Jerry Vickers said, Aubrey, this is Jerry Lawler, and he wants to wrestle for you some over here on your promotion. He said, oh, hey, Jerry, how you doing? He said, you ever wrestled before? I said, oh, yes, sir. He said, where'd you wrestle? I said, oh, man, I wrestled down in Florida. He said, really? What promoter did you wrestle for down there? And I just went, and my face like turned bright red, and it was like my face was flashing. I'm a liar. I'm lying. I'm not telling the truth here. And he knew it immediately. And he said, oh, okay, well, what? No, it's no big deal. He said, I don't have anything right now. He said, but leave me your name and number, and if something comes up, I'll give you a call. And then the fun. Now I got ahead of myself on this story a little bit. I told you earlier that Jackie Fargo had a radio show along with Eddie Bond.
Right.
And when they gave me the job as being the artist, they also gave me a job as being a radio disc jockey from 7 to midnight on the air shift that nobody wanted. Nobody wanted to be on this country music station from 7 to midnight. And so they gave me that air shift, and I had a radio show too, that nobody listened to. So anyway, when the promoter said, I don't really have anything right now, but if something comes up, I'll give you a call. I threw in my whole card and said, well, I was just thinking, I told Jerry Vickers this. I said, I was just thinking that if you let me wrestle for you over here, I'm on the radio over in Memphis, and I could plug the matches for free. And he said, what? I said, oh, yeah, I do my own show every night from 7 to midnight. He said, I could talk about your matches, and that wouldn't cost you a dime. And he said, so you can make a commercial and plug my matches for free? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, okay, I'm going to book you and Jerry this Saturday night as tag team. And so, boom, right there, all of a sudden, I was booked in a match. I've never trained, never had a match for anybody at all. And then I was going to have this match with Jerry Vickers just because of the fact that I could plug the matches on the radio for free. And so I started plugging the matches there on the radio station. And I came in on I went in and I had the match, got in the ring with two guys called the Executioners. They threw me out of the ring immediately. I wanted to try a move that I'd seen somebody do over in Memphis where some guy got sailed through the top and middle rope, and he never even grabbed the ropes to try to break his fall. He just went rolling. He went sailing out, landed on the floor, and did this tumbling roll and came up unscathed. And it was a wrestler named Young Anaya. I remember seeing that move, and as soon as I got in the ring with this guy, I said, "Throw me through the ropes." And so this guy grabs me by the hair and the seat of my pants. He runs across, throws me through the ropes. I didn't grab the ropes or anything. I just went sailing out of the ring. And then the next thing I remember, I was in the back in the dressing room behind the movie screen, and Jerry Vickers was fanning me with his towel. And I'm sitting in a chair, and I went, what happened? He said, what happened? You said, you went sailing out of the ring and landed right on your head on the concrete floor. He said, you're just now waking up. I said, holy crap. So anyway, that was my first match. But I was just being in the ring for those few seconds was so awesome that then the next week I started plugging the matches again. And I mean, I made the funny thing was Nick Goulas and them would promote on our station too. They would actually buy commercials, and Eddie Bond would do the commercials. And Eddie would do it because they had been advertising on the station every week forever. So it was so taken for granted that Eddie would just come on and say, well, big match is coming up this Monday night. Looks like in the main event, Jackie Fargo is going to be going against, or Jackie Fargo and Herb Welch going to be going against the interns with Dr. Ken Ramey. And then we got Don and Al Green going against blah, 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 Phil Hickerson. And that's how he would do the commercials, right? And so I went in one day and I got the whole sound effects library, and I sat down and I put together this commercial for the Saturday night wrestling show at the Avon Theater over in Arkansas. I put this big wrestling bell on the beginning, and I put this crowd noises in the back, and so it comes on, ding ding ding, the crowd, and then I had this voice going, the main event, West Memphis, Arkansas, Jerry Lawler and Jerry Vickers going against the Execution. Just to put this elaborate commercial together, right? And so I'm playing that on my show every night and for a few days. And then all of a sudden, I get there, and on a Friday, the matches were going to be on Saturday, and I get there, and Eddie Bond is on the phone with somebody, right? Eddie Bond was the program director of the station, and he was this country music star in Memphis, and he was a singer and all this stuff, and he was partners with Jackie in the nightclub business. So I hear Eddie on the phone going, no, Jackie, don't do that. Don't, Jackie, it's no need. He's a nice kid. Don't do that. And all of a sudden he motions for me. He says, pick up the extension, And this was back in the day you could have, you had an extension phone. You could just pick up another phone and you could listen to the conversation that was going on, right? So I quietly picked up the phone, and here's Eddie talking to Jackie Fargo, right? And Jackie Fargo says, no, this is a bunch of BS. That kid, after all I've done for him, he's going over there in Arkansas and he's putting on these outlaw matches, these little phony matches with this bunch of punks. He said, that makes our wrestling look bad. He said, I'm not going to stand for it. And Eddie said, no, Jackie, calm down now. It's no big deal. He said, no, it is a big deal to us. We bust our ass over here on Monday nights, and then they go over there on Saturday nights and do some crap like that. I'm not going to have him be a part of that. He said, me and Dennis Hall and Tojo, we're going to go over there Saturday night, and we're going to break some arms. We're going to hurt some people. We're going to bust some heads and break some legs and stuff. And my eyes got big as saucers. I'm looking going. And then Eddie says, Jackie, don't do that. Come on, this is Jerry Lawler. We know this kid. I don't care. They're not going to get away with doing that kind of stuff. And so he hangs up the phone, and And I was in shock. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to go over there tomorrow night, and Jackie Fargo, Dennis Hall, and Tojo Yamamoto are going to come in and cripple us all. They're going to break our legs and stuff, right? So I rushed. I called up Jerry Vickers, and I called up Aubrey Griffith, and I said, listen, I just got off the phone. Jackie Fargo, they're all going to come over and beat us all up Saturday night. I can't come. And Aubrey Griffith just started laughing. He said, they're not going to come over here to West Memphis, Arkansas. They're all booked somewhere else on Saturday night anyway. They're not going to come over here and beat anybody up. He's just trying to do that to discourage you, to keep you from coming over and working this little outlaw show that we have going on. They don't like that kind of stuff. And I said, are you sure? And he said, of course I'm sure. Jackie Fargo is not going to come to the Avon Theater with Tojo Yamamoto and break anybody's arms or legs. Trust me. So anyway, I told Jerry Vickers that night. I went ahead and went, and I told Jerry Vickers, I said, look, I'm still nervous. I said, when we're in the ring out there, I said, when you're in there, I'll watch the front door, and when I'm in there, you watch the front door. And he said, if anybody comes through that even looks like a wrestler, we'll burn the wind. We'll all ass out of here, right? So we went, we had our match. I was a nervous wreck, but sure enough, nobody showed up to break our arms or break our legs. And then I realized that what Aubrey was saying was right. And the very next week, Jackie Fargo came to me and he said, look, kid, we really don't like you doing that crap over there. He said, but I see that you've already been doing it. So let me ask you this. If I get you booked in Memphis for Gulas and Welch, will you stop going to that crap over there and stop plugging it on the radio and all this kind of stuff? And I said, oh my gosh, yes, sir. Absolutely. I'll never think about that again. And so sure enough, the next week I was booked on Memphis TV which, he had said Memphis, which I thought I was going to be booked at like the auditorium in the big house show. But anyway, I was booked just as a job guy on Memphis TV to get my brains beat out by Tojo Yamamoto. But I mean, to me, that was the greatest. I mean, there was that, and then that was like my first match in Memphis for the real promoters. And they started booking me like every week on TV as just to get my brains beat out. But to me, being on TV, all my friends saw that. Not everybody went. Not many of my actual friends would go down to buy a ticket to go to the matches at downtown. But everybody watched it on Saturday TV. So to me, the big deal was to be on TV. Even though you're getting your brains beat out or whatever, you were on TV as a wrestler. And so that was my thanks to Jackie Fargo. And then he was the first one to stuck his neck out to Nick. And then Nick Gulas started booking me every week against Tojo Yamamoto. And Tojo was this little short Japanese wrestler who didn't have any family, not many friends. And he did not like young guys coming in the business. And he would make examples out of them. And I think Nick Gulas would put young guys against Tojo, because Tojo would beat you up so bad and try to hurt you that if you came back after a match with Tojo, they said, well, you know what? This kid's serious. He's got some potential. If he'll take a match with Tojo and take that butt kicking and still wants to be a wrestler, then, he's got a chance. They booked me against Tojo about 6 straight weeks, and he was just beating me up so bad. Then they started booking me against him on TV. And then the Saturday night, the first live events was in Jonesboro, Arkansas, that I got to go to. And sure enough, get over to Jonesboro, booked against Tojo Yamamoto again. And finally, after a few weeks of that, Jackie took me and went into the dressing room with Tojo and said, Tojo, Jerry's a good friend of mine. He's a good kid. Take it easy on him, man. You don't need to make an example out of him, man. You've done enough. And from that time on, then it was like Tojo and I were buddies. And see, Jackie stuck his neck out for me with Tojo. And so, he was a guy that was influential in getting me accepted among amongst the guys that had been there forever,
That's great. Yeah. I mean, what was the transformation from, being quote unquote one of Fargo, being a stooge of Fargo, to actually, being a guy that is threatening to take the top spot in Memphis which ultimately led to the 1974 match between you and him. I mean, how is that from being a wide-eyed kid to yes, Mr. Fargo, yes, sir, to actually headlining and making money with Fargo in the ring?
Well, I still to this day didn't know the total background on at this time in the early 70s. The business was still owned by Nick Goulas and Roy Welch, but they had Jerry Jarrett working with them, helping them book the shows, because the territory at that time was laid out. It was so big. I mean, there were so many major cities that it was impossible. They had to run 2 towns every night. So 2 of the major cities were Memphis and Birmingham, and they both ran on Monday nights. And then so what they had the territory sort of divided into 2 ends, and Nick Goulas was primarily going onward to a different city every night of the week, and his end that he was kind of sort of most in charge of was Birmingham, Huntsville, Nashville, I think maybe, Huntsville, Nashville, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. Those were the major cities that was on one end. And then on the other end was Memphis, Louisville, Evansville, Jonesboro, and Tupelo, Mississippi. Those were the kind of major towns on the other end. So Nick Goulas was going to all of those cities on the Birmingham end. And then I think that Roy Welch sort of got too old to kind of handle it. I started getting a little bit of dementia. So he let Jerry Jarrett start kind of handling the Memphis end of things and being in the town and helping with the booking on the Memphis end. And Jerry he just liked my work. And they had put me, by that time, they had put me with this guy named Jim White as my tag team partner. And they put Sam Bass with us. They did that when we were sort of they first sent us down to Alabama, which was sort of like the NXT. It was a training ground for this territory. And we were just down there a short time. And the promoter down there was Bill Golden. And he gave, I guess, rave reviews to Nick Goulas and everything about us. So they brought us up, and Jerry Jarrett said, let me have him over on the Memphis end. And I'll never forget, we were small guys. I mean, we weren't the big guys, and we would take a lot of bumps, and I really enjoyed the selling part of the match. I enjoyed taking the bumps and doing all these crazy high flying moves and more so than beating up somebody, right? So when I started doing that, all of a sudden, guys like Jackie Fargo and Jerry Jarrett, who was wrestling, they would rather work with me, who would, Jackie Fargo could give me one punch and I'd make a double back flip and land on my, back, as opposed to if he's wrestling Al Green or one of the interns, he'd give those big old guys a punch and they might just shake their head or stagger a little bit. So, they were thinking, man, this Lawler and White, they make us look like $1 million by putting them over the way we did. So those guys wanted to work with us. And I'll never forget the Von Brauners was this big Japanese team managed by Saul Weingroff. They were German team. The Von Brauners was a big German team managed by Saul Weingroff. And then Don and Al Green was another big lumbering tag team. These guys, when they would watch us work, they went to Nick Goulas and complained. He said, man, why would you even use those guys? Are like circus guys out on a trampoline or something. They're like taking all these falls and bumps and stuff like that. And they were upset because the top good guys wanted to work with us and not them anymore. So, but that, that's how that became, it went from me being in a tag team against guys like Jackie and Tojo and Jackie and Jerry to then me they put me in single matches. And that's where this is like in about 1974. And it was just a combination of me being able to make my opponent look really good and me also being able to make some really good interviews about my opponent. And one of those interviews was, when that match you're talking about with me and Jackie, that's where I came up with the deal about, I said, Jackie Fargo, you've been the king of Memphis wrestling for a long time, but you're looking at the kid right here now that's going to knock you off your throne. And then we had the match, and I won the match, and some kids were saying on the way back, now you're the king, you're the king. And just ironically, I met that very same Friday, I met down in Atlanta, Georgia, Bobby Shane, who was wrestling as King Bobby Shane down in Georgia. He loaned me his crown and robe to wear to Memphis TV the next week because he was going to head out on a trip to Australia and just didn't want to lug that stuff with him. So I showed up the next week as the king, thanks to that crown and robe, and that's that's how it got started, just off of that interview with Jackie Fargo.
That's amazing how through your career, King, and that's one of the things that I kind of reading about you, especially as a young kid, reading more about the Memphis Jerry Lawler, is how things just fit into place organically for your career and how things happen. And, meeting Jackie Fargo, from painting signs and painting in his club to main eventing the Mid-South Coliseum with him. And then, being able to call yourself the king because you're knocking him off his throne. It's just, nothing is forced. It's all just, organically happened earlier in your career.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, and, when I look back on it, it's just so amazing of how lucky I was sometimes to be in the right place at the right time, sometimes to meet or know the right people, or just sometimes just incredibly lucky things happen to me, and like you said, it wasn't that ever where I sat down and tried to plan out, and so many things through my career. I never really sat down and tried to plan this stuff out. I just kind of went with the flow and roll with the punches, and things just would turn out good for me somehow. I mean, just like I've said, so many people talk to me about the Andy Kaufman deal, about how man, that was great that you and Andy got together and planned all of this kind of stuff. And in reality, it wasn't really all planned. So much of the stuff, like the slap on the David Letterman show, was not planned. It just, things like that just happened, and we both Andy was so talented that we rolled with the punches, went with the flow, and it just happened to turn out good.
When you started, obviously, you became a big star in Memphis, but you broke into WWE in the early '90s, and obviously a guy that's on Monday Night Raw as a commentator in wrestling. I know you had not only a business relationship with Jackie, but you sometimes called him Pop, and he called you son.
Oh yeah, I mean my dad. That was one of the things that my biggest regrets ever is my dad was such a great wrestling fan. Loved Jackie Fargo, loved all the Memphis wrestling. But my dad died and was buried on my 19th birthday. And so he and I had gone to the matches together and everything. But all of this stuff happened. Literally the drawings and everything happened probably within a month or maybe even weeks after my dad passed away. And I was so, after all of this stuff started happening, I was just thinking all the time, man, I wish my dad could see me now. For if he had ever thought for 1 minute that I would have become a wrestler, I mean, that would have been the greatest thing ever to him. I mean, he just, he really admired it. He loved wrestling, but he and I would go to the matches, but never once would he have ever dreamed that I would become a wrestler. And that's one of my biggest regrets, is that my dad never got to see me wrestle, or even knew that I was getting into the sport at all. But yeah, and Jackie Fargo, he knew, he came along just like right after my dad had passed away, and he really did become, I mean, that's what I called him, Pop, and he called me son. And it was like we really had that kind of relationship for many, many, many years.
So when you did, started making on national TV with WWE, and I know you guys, were still close. Did he ever express, how proud he was of you at all, or?
Well, I knew he was.
Yeah, he didn't say it.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those things. I mean, no kidding, I'd call him up on the phone. That's just the way our if he called me, I'd say hello. He'd say, hi, son. And I say, hi, Pop. And that you know, that's the way everything went. I mean, but it wasn't one of those things where he just wasn't the kind of guy that would come up and say, man, I'm proud of you, son. You know, he might say, dang, you're doing good there, kid. You're doing good. But just, you know, but I knew that it was there. You know, I knew that he was proud, and you know, he was just an awesome guy. And I look back and I think of how much in watching him, how I tried to, you know, emulate him in so many, you know, the way he worked, the way he did his interviews. And, you know, he would teach me stuff along the way. I'll never forget one of the first times, maybe before, you know, when I just things that you would learn just by somebody coming to you and saying, like, I think one of the times I went out on TV and said, I'm Jackie Fargo. Think you're going to beat me? Who's this fat old man think he's going to? What is it? Look at me. Look, I'm a young, blah, blah, blah. And I came back after that interview and he said, son, come here. Let me tell you something. And I said, yes, sir. Now, this was part because when I said it, I'm sure it hurt his feelings a little bit, but he made it into a valuable lesson. He said, don't ever call your opponent, even if he is a fat old man. He said, because when you do that and then you go out there and that fat old man beats you, it's going to make you look bad. He said, always put your opponent over. Always tell people how tough they are. Tell them that they're the greatest thing in the wrestling business. And then when you beat them, you've really done something. But if you go out on your interviews and make, you know, and don't put your opponent over, he said, you're doing it all backwards. And, you know, that was just little things like that he would tell me and he was exactly right. You know, you go out and you say somebody's a fat old man, and then you go out there and all of a sudden, especially if they win the match, everybody say, man, he got beat by a fat old man. So, you know, he was invaluable on stuff like that. And then getting to ride with him, you know, I learned so much just from casual conversations with him.
Well, you know, 2012, you had your cardiac arrest live on Raw. And then I think, you know, after that, when you recovered, that you learned that Jackie was having some, you know, heart problems himself. But I was reading online that, you know, he refused to sell the doctor's, you know, words, and refused to sell his own state of his health. I think there was a quote saying that, you know, oh, hell, I haven't even had a sick day in my life.
Yeah. That was just the way he was.
Yeah.
I would call him or he would call me, and never complained about his health at all. He wouldn't do it.
Now, you played some Fargo audio for us a few weeks ago on the show, and I believe you said you had some more that you wanted to share, maybe?
I do. This was, this was when he wasn't in that great of health, but he came to a show in Nashville, and we were just backstage, and it was cool in the fact that I had a new Samsung Galaxy telephone, and that would take some great pictures and took some great and I just, you know, got him over there, and I said, Jackie, let me show you how these cell phones work now with this, you know, you can do videos and take great pictures on them. So anyway, he just let me do 3 or 4 little videos of just of him talking. Once I think one of them he talked about me, one of them he talked about my son Brian. But it was just some classic stuff of just off the cuff of me just saying, here, Jackie, let me just film you for a minute. Just say anything. But in the videos, you can tell that he was already slipping a little bit. Like he couldn't remember Dave Brown's name or Lance Russell's name on one of them. just, you could just tell a little bit. But they never aired anywhere, and they've never been heard by anybody other than me on my phone. So it's, to me, it's like a piece of Jackie that nobody had ever, nobody was ever going to see or hear again.
Would you want to share some of that, or you want to keep that private?
Yeah, no. Here, I'll do it right now.
Folks, I want to tell you about my buddy Brian Christopher, one of the worst son of a self-suckers I've ever been around in my life. I mean, the worst. I'm not talking just a little bit, the worst. He's always late for a match, never on time. He always wants to go with the boys to the bathroom and all that. He don't want to go with no girl, but that's all right. That's his business. That's his business. But he'll be there one day. Just keep it up, Brian. Keep it up. Keep it up.
He was making motion with his hands like he was drinking. He said, "Keep it up, Brian."
All right, ready? Yeah. It's always a pleasure to come to stinking no good Memphis. You know what I like about it? Nothing. Not one damn thing that I like about Memphis. I don't like nothing about it. And I came here in 1957, whooped everything. Whooped, is that right? Whooped or beat? Okay, I beat everything that got in front of me, and something about a teacup, I'm trying to think. Jay Lawler thinks he can whip me now, really, seriously, he does. He really thinks he can whip me. Well, I got news for him, he can't. Lawler, you never seen the day, Pally.
What about Sputnik Monroe? Can he whip you?
Sputnik Monroe? God said the damn woodchuck. I whipped 4 guys like him at one time. What are you talking about, Sputnik, my age? Sputnik Monroe, he couldn't whip me on his biggest day, him or nobody else in his field.
What about Tojo Yamamoto? Could he whip you?
Not, never, ever, never, 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 ever, never, 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 no. No, you can't never whip me, you no good little squinty-eyed fart.
Who else? Let's see. Who's some other guys? All right. One time Al Green said something about your dad. What?
Al Green, you no good low-down son of a sapsucker, you said something about my father. My dad was the closest thing to my heart. His name was Gabe, and everybody loved him. And my nephew, Sonny Alberson, if you say something about Gabe, you're going to have him to whoop now because he wouldn't let you say anything about my dad. And where do you get off thinking you can whoop me, Al Green? Where did you get off thinking you can whip me? I'm the meanest, toughest son of a gun you ever seen in your life. Don't you ever think you can whoop me, boy? You hear?
That's enough, huh? You still never remember.
Meanest, toughest, roughest son of a sapsucker that ever lived, and there ain't nobody in this town can ever beat me. Sputnik Monroe, who in the hell is Sputnik Monroe? A little 180-pounder that had a face looked like a Frankenstein. He couldn't whoop my little 6-year-old daughter. He couldn't whoop nobody. He was the most overrated wrestler that ever was. And remember that. I said it. The fabulous Jackie Fargo.
What happened to Sputnik on Beale Street?
Oh, he went down there and was going to be big shot, and he got his butt kicked by one of them little 140-pound cowboys. He didn't go back to Beale Street no more. It's a pleasure to be back in good old Memphis, Tennessee. I love Memphis. It's one of my favorite towns to going on here? I just come in and everybody tell me about Lance Russell and brown, yellow, green, orange, or whatever. Well, man, what are you talking about? You don't compare them with Jerry the King Lawler and Rusty. Surely not. Dave Brown, Dave Brown, Dave Brown, and what's his name? Lance Russell. He got a big old nose. Russell, that's it. Russell, you need to stay back digging ditches and driving trucks, because you cannot announce. I'm a better announcer than you ever thought about. And Jerry Lawler's the best in the world. Not one of the best, but the best.
Jesus. You could hear he could not remember Dave's name, and then he couldn't remember Lance's name. It's sad, really. Yeah, those are great. I mean, and those were probably done, I think, around 2012, and you could tell on some of them, he was just kind of slipping. But I did just put him on the spot, just standing back in the locker room saying, "Come on, just talk about whatever." And a couple, he couldn't remember Dave Brown's name, and then when he got further into the interview, he couldn't remember Lance's name, and then I think he couldn't even remember what we were talking about. We were trying to talk about, he was comparing my announcing to Lance and Dave's, but he just, he would just. It was kind of, it was kind of sad after I did the interviews to just realize, how sharp and how great on the microphone he always was, and then to see that, that slippage there was just, it was sad to me.
Yeah, but still very entertaining, man. So you could.
Oh gosh, you can imagine, and he legitimately did not like Sputnik Monroe. He just, I guess it was probably always jealous of the attention that Sputnik got there in Memphis. Now, Sputnik was the big deal. Jackie came along and took the spotlight off of Sputnik. Jackie came into Memphis after Sputnik and Billy Wicks had done their deal, but he didn't like Sputnik. And I think you had some more video or footage of him saying he didn't like women wrestlers. He didn't like midget wrestlers.
Yeah. Well, there's a great, if someone wants to learn more about Jackie Fargo, but also just Memphis wrestling in general, is Memphis Heat, a great documentary that you were involved in.
Documentary that is.
Yeah, he was Jackie Fargo's interview with him. There's Rocky Johnson, Jerry Jarrett, Jimmy Hart, everybody that Calhoun was there. I mean, a lot of people that were involved with Memphis wrestling back then is in this documentary. I highly recommend the documentary.
I told you earlier too that a lot of people, we have listeners all around the world, and probably the majority of the listeners are not, we're not ever familiar with Jackie Fargo. They're sitting here listening to us talk about a guy that they've never even heard of. Mm-hmm. But he was an instrumental part of my career, and not just my career, but my whole life. And so, that's why we wanted to do this today. And we didn't even scratch the surface. We could do a whole episode. And if people want to, if we get enough demand, we can go back and do a whole episode on Jackie Fargo's ribs. And by ribs, I mean, he was the ultimate prankster. A lot of people later on in life would say that Owen Hart was the ultimate prankster in the WWE. Well, Jackie he may have been the originator of the rib and the ultimate pranks, but he done so many that we could sit and talk for hours just going over the different things that he did. Some of them would be pretty off color and a little hard to talk about, but they were just, he was just amazing.
A couple questions before we wrap it up, King, just really quickly. We didn't talk about the Fargo strut at all, and PJ16238 on Twitter wants to know, she heard about the Buddy Rogers strut and also the Jackie Fargo strut. Which was the original one?
That is a very good question. Of course, I never saw I never saw Buddy Rogers because he didn't come down to Memphis. So for me, the original was the Jackie Fargo strut. But I would think that it probably it may have started somewhere along the same time. Buddy Rogers was in New York. Jackie Fargo and his not real brother, but Don Colt was this guy's name, but it was Jackie and Don Fargo up in New York, and they started doing the strut as a tag team. The two of them would strut across the ring simultaneously, and so I would imagine that those two guys and Buddy Rogers were in the same area at the same time, and that they probably did it as a tag team while he was doing it as a single wrestler. Mm-hmm. But as far as I was concerned, far as everybody down in Memphis, the Jackie Fargo strut was it. And of course, I tried to copy it. Bill Dundee tried to copy it. I mean,
Bill Dundee tried to copy it. That was probably the worst strut I ever seen in my life. Is Bill Dundee trying?
We all tried to copy the Fargo strut, but he was the original. And then of course, you could talk about Jackie was instrumental in putting two guys together, or it was part of a great gimmick. The Fabulous Ones. He called himself the Fabulous Jackie Fargo. So he put Steve Kern and Stan Lane together and made them probably one of the most successful tag teams that was ever in Memphis as the Fabulous Ones. And Jackie was their supposed mentor and would go and accompany them to the ring a lot of times. And, it was just the two guys getting a rub off of a guy like Jackie Fargo, and it made them instant stars.
Final questions, a couple of these. William wants to know, this is off our Facebook page, we all know William Shatner inducted you into the WWE Hall of Fame, and you mentioned that, Lance Russell probably was your choice, but did you ever think of having Jackie Fargo induct you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it was just one of those things, I think, at the time about they were really pushing so hard to make a national exposure thing on the Hall of Fame. This was when it was being shown on the USA Network and that sort of thing. So it was all about. It wasn't that I didn't want Jackie. He would have been awesome. Lance would have been awesome. But William Shatner had the more national exposure and had the bigger name. And of course he was awesome. I mean, I couldn't have been happier with that being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame by Captain Kirk, who was a childhood or a big, a lifelong hero and TV star of mine.
Well, King, I think that's a great episode of Jackie Fargo. The stories, more of the behind the scenes, and a wide-eyed Jerry Lawler. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's I can't. Me being around you and kind of not saying yes, sir, but saying yes, King, no, King. Paying respect to someone that I looked up to. I can fully understand having that same kind of outlook at Jackie Fargo when you were growing up, 19, 20 years old, but then also being able to work in the ring with him and kind of dethrone him off the Memphis wrestling, and you take the crown and run with it. And remain friends all those years. It's very touching to hear all that.
Yeah, and if talk about people that you love to work with, God, did I love to work with Jackie Fargo. That was like the dream come true every time I'd get booked against Jackie, and we got to wrestle against each other hundreds of times all over the Memphis territory and all the different cities, and that was my one of my all-time favorite opponents and mentor and friend and father figure and everything. He was the best to me.
Well, we have to do another episode about him, about all his ribs, and go a little bit deeper about Jackie Fargo.
Oh, there's so much more that we didn't even touch the surface on. I could tell you about, his brother. He wrestled as Jackie and Don Fargo up in New York and around the country before he came to Memphis. And Don was not his real brother. But he did have a real brother that came to Memphis to wrestle with him on occasion, and he was called Roughhouse Fargo, and Jackie always called him Nuthouse because the story went that he was in a mental institution up in Bolivar, Tennessee, and if things got real bad, or if Jackie could, ran up against two guys that he couldn't handle, he could go and get Roughhouse or Nuthouse out on like a day pass, right? And he would have to be responsible for him. But then he would bring him to the arenas, and it would be Jackie and Roughhouse Fargo against whoever his opponents were. And what a sight and what kind of matches those guys had. It was unbelievable.
Well, King, I think we'll do another episode about Jackie Fargo in the near future. Next week, how about we do a Ask the King Anything, where people can send in questions to the King. I still have a ton left over from our previous episodes that we didn't use. So we're going to do that next week. Ask the King Anything. One of these episodes we'll do. Also, be sure to check out the website, podavenue.com/king, for all our past episodes, all the links to the podcasts. And check out Jerry Jarrett's podcast. He did an episode on Vince McMahon in Memphis. I know we did one, King, but Jerry Jarrett goes in depth on booking Memphis wrestling with Jerry Jarrett on podavenue.com/Memphis as well. So, all right, King, final word.
Final word, Pally. No, I really enjoyed this. I mean, going down memory lane with somebody that was as special to me as my real father, with Jackie Fargo. Thank everybody for listening. And if you liked it, let us know, tweet about it, and we'll do some more on Jackie, because I would love to do some more on him.
I was meaner than a damn rattlesnake and tougher than a $2 steak. And you better not mess with me, because if you did, you's gonna get hurt.
Hey, before we go today, I want to remind you one more time about Blue Chew. That's right, Blue Chew. You can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. BlueChew.com brings you the first chewable with the same FDA-approved ingredients as Viagra and Cialis. They work up to twice as fast as a pill, so you can be ready anytime, day or night. That's great. Woo! Blue Chew is the better, cheaper, faster choice. So visit BlueChew.com. Get your first shipment absolutely free when you use our special promo code KING, K-I-N-G. All you do is pay $5 for shipping. Again, that's Blue, B-L-U-E, Chew.com. Promo code KING to try it for free.
The preceding show is a Pod Avenue production.